At my daughter's memorial service, her husband leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Glenda, I just want to be upfront with you. The house, the business, the insurance policy, all of it transfers to me now. That's just how the law works. I hope we can handle the next few weeks without any complications." He pulled back and gave me a small, patient smile. The kind of smile a man gives a woman he's already decided is not a problem. I looked him in the eye and said, "Of course, Reed. Whatever Savannah would have wanted." He nodded and moved on to accept condolences from people he barely knew. I sat down in the front row at Covenant Funeral Home in Charlotte, North Carolina, folded my hands in my lap, and looked at the photograph of my daughter on the foam board beside her casket. 38 years old, laughing at the camera on a beach at Hilton Head, her curls blowing sideways in the wind. And I made a quiet, total decision. My name is Glenda Hartwell. I am 62 years old. I was a certified public accountant for 34 years, and I know exactly what it looks like when a man thinks the numbers have already worked out in his favor. Savannah was my only child. I had her late, 33, single, terrified, the happiest I had ever been. I raised her in the same house I still live in, a brick ranch on Briar Creek Road that I bought myself the year I made partner at my firm. Her father wasn't in the picture. I didn't need him to be. Savannah grew up knowing two things: that I loved her completely, and that she could do anything she decided to do. She believed both. By 35, she had built Hartwell Properties from a one-woman operation into a real estate development company with 6 employees and a commercial portfolio spread across Mecklenburg County. She was sharp, methodical, funny in a dry way that caught people off guard. She met Reed Croft at a networking event downtown. He was a mortgage broker, good-looking in an unremarkable way, charming in the manner of people who have practiced being charming. I liked him well enough at first. He made Savannah laugh. They married in October of the year she turned 36. 2 years later, my daughter was dead. The official account was an accident. Reed told police that Savannah had been coming down the staircase of their home in the Dilworth neighborhood, a beautiful 1940s craftsman they'd renovated together, when she slipped. He said he heard the fall from the kitchen. By the time he reached her at the bottom of the stairs, she was unconscious. He called 911. She was pronounced dead at Atrium Health Maine 2 hours later. Traumatic brain injury. She was 38 years old. No substances in her system. No history of balance problems. No prior fall. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Nothing visible suggested otherwise. But I am Savannah's mother. Savannah wore the same pair of Birkenstock sandals every day she was home. She'd kick them off at the base of the stairs the moment she walked in. She had done this since college. Those stairs were as familiar to her as the back of her own hand. She walked them dozens of times a day. And in the 2 weeks before she died, she'd sounded different on the phone. Quieter. One evening she asked me, out of nowhere, "Mom, do you still have the login for our old H&R Block account?" I asked why. She said, "Just in case. I might need to pull some old returns." She didn't explain. I didn't push. I should have pushed. At the memorial, 2 things caught my attention that Reed didn't think would. First, he was wearing Savannah's watch. A Movado she'd bought herself to mark the close of her first major commercial deal, a simple gold-faced piece she'd worn on her left wrist for 3 years without taking it off. Reed had it on his right wrist, face turned inward. Easy to miss. I didn't miss it. Second, Savannah's closest friend from college, a woman named Joanne who'd driven down from Raleigh, found me after the service. She held me for a long time and then said quietly, "I don't know if this matters, but the last time I talked to her, Savannah said something strange. She said, 'If Reed and I split up, I need to make sure the business is protected.'" I thought she was just thinking through a worst-case scenario. But Glenda, she sounded scared. Not sad, scared. I thanked Joanne. I filed it away. I drove home alone that evening. I sat at the kitchen table where Savannah used to do homework, where we did taxes together every February, where I taught her to balance her first checkbook when she was 16. The house held its breath around me, and I held mine. 3 days after the memorial, I was sitting at that same table with my new phone, trying to move through the administrative misery of losing a child. Insurance notifications, bank paperwork, the 1,000 forms that materialize immediately and do not care that you cannot breathe. I was scrolling through my apps when I noticed a folder in voice memos I didn't recognize. Savannah had added me to her iCloud family sharing 2 years earlier, back when she'd set up my mother on the plan. I'd never fully configured it on my end. When I'd gotten my new iPhone the week before the memorial, it must have downloaded everything from the shared plan during setup without me realizing it. There were dozens of her memos synced to my phone, notes to herself, business reminders, and one, near the bottom of the list, with a title that made my hands go still. Mom, if something happens. I pressed play. Her voice, Savannah's voice, low and careful like she was worried about being heard even in an empty room. Mom, I don't know if this is crazy. Maybe it is. But I need to put this somewhere, and I don't know who else I trust right now. A pause. I heard her exhale slowly. I've been going through the business accounts for the past 6 weeks. I found transfers I didn't authorize. Money going to a company called RMC Capital Partners. I looked it up. It's a Delaware LLC. Registered agent is a P.O. box at a law firm in Wilmington. No real address, no website. Mom, there is $430,000 gone from Hartwell Properties' operating account that I cannot account for. Her voice dropped lower. Raid handles the bookkeeping. He has the account access. I haven't confronted him yet because I'm scared about what happens when I do. He's been different lately. Cold. 2 weeks ago I came home and my home office was unlocked and I always lock it. I think he went through my files. I don't know what he was looking for. A pause. If something happens to me, look at the accounts. Look for RMC Capital Partners. And Mom, I love you. I'm sorry if I'm wrong and this is nothing, but I needed to say it somewhere, just in case. The recording ended. I sat at that table for a long time, then I opened my laptop. I have spent my career following money through the places people try to hide it. I know how shell companies are structured, how transfers get coded to look like vendor payments, how a patient person can move funds through layers of documentation until the origin is almost undetectable. Almost. I started with the quarterly statements Savannah had made me a backup signatory on years ago when she launched the business. You're the only accountant I trust, Mom, she'd said. I had never touched those accounts. Now I went through every line. The pattern was not subtle once you knew to look. 14 months, 31 wire transfers, each between $7,000 and $45,000. Kept below reporting thresholds, timed irregularly to avoid pattern recognition. All to RMC Capital Partners. Memo descriptions were vague. Consulting fees, project management, vendor services. I pulled up the Delaware Division of Corporations Public Database. RMC Capital Partners LLC registered 14 months ago to an agent that specialized in anonymous incorporations. Within 4 days, a forensic accountant I'd known from professional circles traced the downstream account to a personal checking account at a regional bank in Concord, North Carolina. The account holder was Reed Marcus Croft. $431,000. Taken from my daughter's company, from the business that bore her name. I sat with that for one night. Then I went looking for help. Corbin Oakes had retired from financial investigations with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department and opened a private practice on South Boulevard. He was unhurried, careful with language, the kind of investigator who let you finish your sentences. A former colleague referred me to him. We met at a coffee shop 2 miles from my house. I slid the spreadsheets across the table. He looked them over without rushing. Then he looked at me. She knew, he said. She knew, I said, and she left me a map. He'd been doing his own preliminary work. He pulled out a folder. Inside were surveillance photographs taken over the weeks since Savannah's death. Reed and a woman I didn't recognize. A restaurant in Noda, a hotel off South Tryon, his car in a parking garage. The woman was a paralegal named Melinda Price, employed at a small firm in Ballantyne. She and Reed had been together for at least 8 months. Corbin believed it was longer. There was more. Reed had taken out a secondary life insurance policy on Savannah 11 months prior, after the embezzlement had begun. The policy was for $1.5 million. He was the sole beneficiary. Savannah's signature was on the application. I stared at her name on that line for a long time. It looked like her handwriting. It also looked slightly wrong in a way that only someone who had been reading her handwriting for 38 years would register. We brought everything to Detective Priya Anand at the CMPD Economic and Financial Crimes Unit. She was measured and direct and did not minimize what she was looking at. The accidental ruling was based on the information available at the time, she said. New information changes the picture. She opened a formal request for the medical examiner to conduct a supplemental review of Savannah's case. And she told me that to compel mistakes from people who thought they were safe, we needed to apply pressure carefully. I knew how to do that. On a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the memorial, I drove to the house in Dilworth. Reed answered the door in weekend clothes, easy and relaxed. He'd already changed the locks. He offered me coffee. I declined. "I've been going through some of Savannah's files," I said, keeping my voice gentle, slightly lost. A grieving mother at sea and paperwork she doesn't understand. Some business records she kept at home. There are account numbers I don't recognize. A company name I'd never heard of. I shook my head slowly. Her accountant suggested I look into anything unusual. Something called RMC Capital Partners. Reed's hand on the table went very still. "I wouldn't worry about that," he said. "That was a routine vendor relationship." "Oh, okay." I stood as if reassured, then at the door. "Her accountant is reviewing everything just for the estate documentation. I wanted you to know in case they reach out." I gave him a small, tired smile. He gave me one back. I got in my car and drove away. Corbin called that evening. Reed had called Melinda 12 minutes after I left the house. They spoke for 19 minutes. Reed then drove to a FedEx office and used a public computer. Melinda went to their bank branch in Ballantyne the following morning and attempted to initiate a wire transfer to an offshore account that Detective Anand's unit had placed on a watch list the day before. The bank's fraud prevention system flagged the transaction. The transfer was blocked, but she'd tried. 2 days later, Detective Anand brought them in separately. Reed came with a lawyer in a charcoal suit. He sat straight, arms loosely crossed, projecting mild cooperation. Detective Anand laid the documents in front of him one at a time. The shell company, the transfers, the insurance policy application, the suspected forgery. Reed had a prepared answer for each one. Consulting services, proper documentation, legitimate business expenses. His lawyer deflected with procedural language. Then Detective Anand placed a transcript of Savannah's voice memo on the table. "Your wife made this recording 9 days before she died," she said. "She named RMC Capital Partners specifically. She said she was afraid to confront you. She said she didn't know what would happen when she did." Detective Anand lets the silence sit. "She was going to go to the police. You knew that." Reed looked at the transcript. His jaw moved slightly. "I'd like to speak with my attorney privately," he said. Melinda had no lawyer with her. She'd come alone. That told me something about what Reed had led her to believe. Detective Anand sat across from her and placed the bank records on the table. The surveillance photographs, the blocked wire transfer. Then she said, "Reed has been in the next room for 40 minutes. He's told us the embezzlement scheme was driven by your financial pressure on him, that he went along to protect you. He's framing you as the one who wanted Savannah out of the way, because you wanted him free." Melinda looked up. The color drained from her face in a single, visible moment. "That's not what happened," she said. "Tell me what happened." It took 20 minutes. The embezzlement had been Reed's plan entirely. He had been building toward a different life. Leave Charlotte, leave the mortgage business, start over somewhere coastal. Melinda had known about the money. She had accepted $63,000 in transfers from the shell company into her own account. When Savannah had started asking questions, Reed told Melinda they were out of time. He didn't say what he intended to do. He said the problem needs to be resolved. Melinda told herself that meant they would leave. Just disappear before Savannah could go to anyone. She said she didn't know what resolved had actually meant until after. On a Wednesday evening, Reed had told Savannah he needed to show her something in the upstairs office. They had argued. Melinda did not know exactly what happened at the top of the stairs. She knew Savannah had not slipped. I stood behind the observation glass with both hands pressed flat against the cold surface. I did not look away. Melinda Price was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement. Reed Croft was charged with first-degree murder, fraud, embezzlement, insurance fraud, and forgery. The medical examiner's supplemental review found bruising patterns on Savannah's upper arms inconsistent with an unassisted fall, evidence suggesting she had been grabbed before impact. The official cause of death was amended from accidental to homicide. 5 months after my daughter's memorial, I stood at a podium in Mecklenburg County Courthouse in the dark green blazer Savannah had given me 2 Christmases before. She'd wrapped it in silver paper and said, "Mom, you need something that isn't navy." I had worn navy for 30 years. I wore the green. I looked at Reed Croft in his defendant's chair, and I read from my statement. My name is Glenda Hartwell. I am 62 years old. I am a retired CPA and the mother of Savannah Marie Hartwell, who built a business from her own savings, her own name, and her own 10 years of work. Reed Croft killed my daughter for money he had already stolen from her. He killed her because she was smart enough to find out, and he underestimated how much of her mother she carried in her. He thought he had married a woman he could manage. He thought I was an old woman he could dismiss with a few words at a memorial service. He was wrong about both of us. Savannah left me a voice she had recorded in a locked room because she loved me enough to think of me, even when she was afraid. She trusted me with the most difficult thing she ever had to say. That trust is the reason Reed Croft will spend the rest of his life in a cell, and I want this court to know that my daughter's death is not an ending. It became the beginning of a fight I intend to finish. Reed Croft was convicted on all counts, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Melinda Price pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and embezzlement and received 13 years at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. The embezzled funds were fully recovered and returned to Savannah's estate. After legal fees, I established two things in her name: a financial literacy scholarship at UNC Charlotte, where she earned her business degree, and a small fund supporting first-generation entrepreneurs in Charlotte who need accounting resources they can't afford. The fraudulent life insurance claim was voided entirely. Reed will never see a dollar of it. It is 7 months later now. I am on the back porch on Briar Creek Road on a cool November morning, second cup of coffee, watching the last of the oak leaves come down. The yard looks the way it always does this time of year, open and very clear. Corbin and I have started building something. We don't have a formal name yet. What we have is a network, an informal chain of accountants, investigators, retired law enforcement, and attorneys who volunteer time for families who've been told a death was accidental and can't stop feeling that something has been missed. Detective Anand sits on the advisory side. We've helped 3 families so far. 2 cases remain open. One resulted in an arrest last month. This morning I got a call from a man in Gastonia. A retired teacher whose daughter died 8 months ago ruled a fall in the bathtub. His son-in-law had taken out a significant life insurance policy on her 4 months before she died. The father said, "The detective I talked to told me there was nothing there. But I keep thinking, she was 29. She was completely healthy. Something's wrong." His voice had that particular quality I recognized, a person carrying a question that no one is helping them ask. I told him to come to Charlotte. I told him I'd have the coffee on. People like Reed Croft count on the rest of us being too shattered to look closely, too old, too female, too gutted by grief to trace a wire transfer through a Delaware LLC to a personal checking account in Concord. They stand at memorial services in rehearsed calm and give the people closest to the victim a practiced smile and a clean story, and they count on that story holding. They forget that some of us have spent our careers following money to where it was never supposed to be found. They forget that the women they dismiss are sometimes the same women who taught their wives how to be careful, how to document everything, how to leave a record, just in case. Savannah recorded that memo on a Tuesday night in a locked room because she was her mother's daughter. She knew that the truth, put somewhere safe, could outlast anything that happened to her. She was right.